There's a big challenge in the industry of finding good talent, and finding the talent is one piece of the puzzle. But then, what do we do when we have them? What do we do when they're on the team and they're in place? How do we now turn them into the leaders that we were hoping that they would be? Well, hello and welcome to another guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and I'm excited because today we're going to be having a conversation around leadership and team development, specifically developing those leaders within your organization. And as I work with our coaching clients in our elite coaching program, and I also work with my clients on the fractional CFO side, what I'm finding is that there's a big challenge in the industry of finding good talent. And finding the talent is one piece of the puzzle. But then what do we do when we have them? What do we do when they're on the team and they're in place? How do we now turn them into the leaders that we were hoping that they would be? And so many business owners kind of get stuck there, maybe because you might not have ever been a leader yourself, so you don't know how to develop one, or you did lead, but you did it naturally and you learned from your own experiences, and you haven't really thought about how to I don't know what the word is, that how to transfer that knowledge and that expertise that you've developed to people on your team. And our guest today is somebody who's an expert in that, and we're going to introduce her in just a moment. But if you're struggling or have the need for expanding your team, growing your team, having that leadership team in place, then you should also know that our Law Firm Growth Summit is coming up February 4th, 5th, and 6th. So right around the corner. It is a virtual conference that we put on once a year. We bring in a ton of industry leaders and experts. We have over 50 speakers at our upcoming summit. People want to know the time of the event. Block the whole day, block your calendars. And if you can't be there for the whole thing, there's the opportunity to purchase the recordings of the event. You can do that as well. Registration is absolutely free. There's no reason that you shouldn't register, even if it's just to attend one session. So go to lawfirmgrowthsummit.com, lawfirmgrowthsummit.com, and join well over 2,000 other law firm owners, experts, leaders in the industry in collaborating, coming together to grow your business and step into the 2025 that you dreamed your business would be. Our guest today is Karen Colligan, and Karen is she's been relentless in her quest to develop talent, especially leaders, and it's why she founded PeopleThink. She has created people initiatives to move people, teams, and organizations from point A to wherever they want or need to go. Karen lives in Manhattan, loves the Jersey Shore, and live music makes her very happy. And we kind of connected the dots. I'm about 30 minutes from Manhattan. We both love the Jersey Shore, so we connected in the green room. And hopefully, some of you, her background speaks to you. But Karen, we welcome to the show. We start off with something really easy, which is, tell us a little bit about yourself and how in the world did you get into leadership development?
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here. So I worked in technology, and everything I did within technology was how to develop employees. And so I recruited, I worked on integrations where we bought organizations and really looked at how do we develop the culture and how do we get them to put together a career strategy? What did leadership mean to them and to us as an organization? So I did that, and I did it in Jersey. Then I went to Dallas. Then I went to San Francisco, and I really, really loved it. And then I got this bug because I was working with small startups, and it was so much fun to watch them really move their organization, move their individual performance. And I really was like, oh, this is very cool. And I started to get tired of the very large organization I belong to. And I started to realize that, wait a minute, I've got I have longevity, and I really want to make a difference, and I want to love what I do. How am I going to do that? Ooh, I got to start my own business. And so it was not a natural thing. Again, chick from Jersey, been in business 25 years. We're celebrating our 25th year. really didn't expect it, and it just happened so naturally. So that's how I got to People Think.
Awesome. Karen, I want to jump right in because, um, like I mentioned in the intro, there's a lot of people having challenges just finding the people out there. Um, First thing is, are you finding that people are hiring leaders and then needing to kind of gloss them over, shine them to get them to where they need to be? Or are you finding way more of people are in an organization and they just kind of get elevated to that leadership role from within whatever they were doing before?
Moshe, it's the latter. Because recruiting, because it's such a competitive marketplace right now, and trying to find talent is so complicated. And so what's happening is you are a good individual performer. You're smart. You've subject matter expert. Oh my goodness, you're going to be a great leader. So we're just going to move you over there. And oh, by the way, we're not going to give you any leadership training. You'll figure it out. You're smart. And what we recognize is time and time again, there isn't a direct correlation between an individual performer and leadership competencies. And the crazy thing is 47% of people who get put into leadership roles never get any leadership training. That's insane. So just because I'm good at something doesn't mean I'm going to be a good leader. There are strict competencies that you need to really understand and learn and be able to practice and execute.
So is that something that business owners should be thinking about before elevating somebody to the leadership role? That like not everybody is cut out to be a leader, and just because they're a good performer, maybe it's not a good idea to elevate them to leadership. And if that's the case, and you'll answer that question, but if that's the case, then the follow-up question to that is, then how do I know beforehand and elevate the right people, prepare the right people for that next step?
Yeah. So in order for people to really recognize if I, Karen Colligan, can be a leader, I have to do some work on myself. And organizations need to help individual performers begin to do the work before they elevate them into a leadership role. So there has to be a place of self-awareness. They have to do self-assessment work around what are my values? What am I great at? What do I stink at? What are my internal barriers? What has stopped me before? And really get a handle on, are those competencies what we want to move forward into a leadership role? The other thing the organization has to be very crystal clear about is, what do they want from a cultural perspective? Like what does their leadership model look like? Who do they want to be leaders? And then if there is again, a match between that, then they can begin the process of development. So I talk about self-awareness, develop, grow, repeat. And that has to be the signal to any organization about any kind of development, especially someone moving into a leadership development role.
You mentioned culture being an important piece of this puzzle. What are the different types of cultural leadership? I mean, are we talking about whether like in parenting there's, you can parent by giving rewards for good behavior, or you can slap people in the butt and, and get them in line, right? Is that what we're talking about by cultural leadership? Like whether you want to lead with an iron fist or a golden carrot?
Yes. So when I think of culture and I speak about culture, I'm really talking about how to set the tone for the organization. So what that means is, as a leader, so first I have to think, what's the vision? Like what's the vision of the organization? Okay, I've got that kind of clear. Now I have to think about, how am I going to build it? And that's the culture piece. And that's the piece of, what kind of employees do I want to have? What kind of organization do I want to have from a people perspective? What do I want the world to know? What do we want our customers to know about us? How are we going to operate? And so that's decision, again, from the leadership team. And once they have that culture in place, then they can put a strategy in place. But the culture has to be the foundation. So there has to be some very thoughtful time spent on What are we going to do? And how are we going to lead this organization? Because no matter what leadership team you have, everybody shows up differently. However, there's a set of ground rules of how I'm going to operate as a leader. That's the culture, and that's who you recruit to.
Okay. I understand that. Um, I have somebody that I've handpicked, right? Like they're gonna be the next leader in my organization. What is there a specific set of assessments other than what you already said? Like, okay, we're gonna assess where they are as an individual. What are their faults? What are the things that they're good at? We're gonna be really clear about what the organization needs. But is there like an actual assessment, something like a Kobe or something like that, that you would recommend giving somebody before you elevate them into a leadership role?
Yes. I use multiple assessments. I mean, actually, what I do for a living, of course I do. One of the assessments I used is called Lumina Spark, and it measures 24 qualities. And I use it with all my executive coaching clients. And it really begins to look at, how do I show up instinctively? Like, how do I show up just as natural? How do I show up every day? Like, what hats do I have to put on? And am I capable of shifting? And then the third component is, how do I operate under stress? And our stress performance shifts under stress. So we have those calibrations to be able to say, okay, let's look at these and let's look at where are the gaps, and thinking about the culture, thinking about the vision. Is this someone we're ready to move into a leadership role? That's another place that I go. So in order to go through this curricula, if you will, it always is about the self-development, and it always goes back to the assessment work.
Okay, and that was Lumina Spark.
Lumina Spark, it's at Lumina Learning. They're out of the UK.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I googled it real quick. I found it. Just wanted to make sure that our listeners heard it. Um, Once again, before we're developing a leader into the role, there's different leadership positions, right? So, I mean, I understand from our own organization and helping our clients get elevated and grow their business to a certain degree and a certain level. Often, they're coming into our world without any leadership at all, and
Mhm.
the owner is the leader, and they're trying to figure out or navigate some questions, and some of those questions are, when do I add leaders, right? And then another question that they might have is, where do I need those leaders, right? Like, is it a COO? Is it or other people would call it an integrator from Gino Wickman's language, or just a business manager, office manager, something like that? Or do I need somebody overseeing specific departments within the business? So before we even talk about let's develop leaders, can we talk about where do we need leaders, and where is there a specific place within the organization that's the right place to start?
Yes. So it goes back to what the strategy of the organization is and what their growth model looks like. Once they're clear about where they want to go, then they can begin populating what would a potential, I'll just use org chart as a frame of reference. So if we are growing and this is what our expectations are in the next 6 months, what we know is we're going to need, I don't know, an operations manager that it moves into a senior business operations leader who can lead the projects. We might need a CFO. We might need just a controller. However, until the organization does some due diligence on where they're headed, then they're just going to start throwing people in leadership roles, and it's not going to make any difference. I mean, it might be good for the individual performer because they're learning. However, if you're really thinking about growth potential in the organization, you have to be very strategic about where you're growing and then who's going to help propel your business forward.
I I mean, typically when a business is growing, right? Like, we either need to grow on the sales and marketing side, right, or we need to grow on the product delivery side as the starting point, right? So, um, I imagine those would be the first places that we need leaders. Is there a rule of thumb to determine, when a leader is needed? Is it a certain number of people on the team? Is it a certain amount of time spent in that area of the business? Is it just when I think and I know it's different depending on the business, but there's a lot of people who listen to this podcast that are new to this whole concept of, hey, I even need a leader, right? So when we're looking at that, it could be really confusing, and often business owners don't take the next step they need to take because they're just in this place of like, I don't know what to do next. Um, if choosing between putting a leader on the marketing side or putting a leader on the product delivery side, which is the one that you think is the higher priority when somebody's first starting to insert leadership in their organization?
Well, I'll go back to what you just said. It depends. And of course, it depends on strategy because that's what I just
Hmm.
talked about. But what you want to be thinking about is which of those positions is going to give you the most growth potential to be able to move the business where you want to go. And it's really up to the leader to make that decision of who's coming in. Now, what I want to respond to also is like, when is it time to put a leader in a role? It's time to put a leader in a role when you no longer have that expertise. You've got multiple people. They may not all be speaking the same language. They may not all be headed in the same project viewpoint as you would like them to be. And you don't have the time, the capacity, or the capability to be able to continue to grow that piece of the business. That's when you know it is time to put someone in charge that is not you, because you cannot be everything to everyone. And the best leaders hire the smartest people who are smarter than them in whatever their expertise is.
Yeah, I love that. And going back to the original discussion, right? Like being an expert in something doesn't necessarily make you a good leader. So we have to be really careful, as we navigate that, marrying the expertise. You don't necessarily need the smartest person in the room to be the leader. As a matter of fact, the smartest person in the room should probably be underneath the leader, right? They should be out there executing on the specific area of expertise that they're so really good at. Um,
Yes. And let me just say one other thing about that because it made me pop. So when I was in tech and we would bring and elevate the really good technical people to be account managers. Oftentimes it didn't work so well because of what we're just talking about. They just didn't have the skill set. But the other thing I can't stress enough is, does that person want to be a leader? And some people go, no, I love what I do. In tech, what we had to do, we put a whole career track for technology in place because we had so many technical people who said, I don't want to be a leader. I don't want to manage anything. I don't want to lead anything. I love what I do. I want to lead myself and be a self leader and be the expert in this particular technology. So not everybody wants to be. So just because as a leader, I go, oh, Moshe, you should be this, you may say, not interested. So there has to also be a connection between, oh, yes, I would like to do that.
It's very interesting that you bring that up because we've had similar conversations around motivating staff, right? Like if you want to do performance-based compensation, something like that, often we think that everybody just wants more money. And the reality is that so many people are not motivated by money and they're motivated by other things like a parking spot or recognition or a half a day off or whatever the case may be. Like there's so many other ways that you can reward somebody and you have to understand your people. So it's important to have these conversations and not make assumptions, and I think that like bringing that up here is really important because we really want to have buy-in from our people with everything that we do. So if we just come up with some crazy idea from our perch up top and execute on that, often we're alienating the staff because we're off the mark when it comes to fulfilling their needs, helping them with their career path, or motivating them. So if we have conversation with them and ask them for their input, what do you want? Whether it's, do you want to be a leader or do you want to just be the best that you can be in this role? As well as other things like what motivates you in compensation? What do you like to do in your free time? All that stuff. If we ask them those questions and then they get offered the thing that they said they wanted, now they've got skin in the game. They're the one who asked for it. They're
Yes.
much more likely to want to succeed, to step into that role, to prove that what they asked for is really what they wanted.
Yes. And so this goes back to leadership and competencies and who people are as leaders. So, there's IQ where it's really about the expertise. I'm going to solve problems. I understand, what has to get accomplished. The EQ side to me, and people sometimes say it's the soft side, say it's the power skills, are the ones that are going to develop the relationships, the ones that are going to show empathy, the ones who are going to listen, the ones who are going to ask those questions. So, with a leader, if they're just in this IQ space, and we've all seen them, we've all reported to them, we know what they look like, and they don't have any of this EQ space that really looks at who are you as a human being? How do I empathize with you? How do I motivate you? How do I recognize you? They ain't ever going to be successful.
Love it. Okay, so we talked about when's the right time to bring to bring a leader into a specific role. We talked about how to identify leaders within your organization. We talked about the fact that leaders typically come within and not from outside. We talked about how to figure out if they are a leader. So now let's talk about the place that Karen, you're an expert in, which is the actual development of a leader.
Mhm.
So how do I go about developing somebody who I believe is going to be a leader? They tell me they want to be a leader. That I've decided this is the piece of my business that needs leadership. How do I go about actually handing the reins to them and preparing them for success?
Yeah. Well, handing the reins will take time. So, what has to be accomplished is first to understand what is that role of the leader going to be. And then you do you back into it. So, okay, these are the set of skills that I need to have in order to be able to move into this role. What do I have? Where are my gaps? Okay. Once I understand my gaps, then what do I do about those gaps and where do I begin to fill in those gaps so that in fact I can move into that position? So it needs to be incremental. It needs to be, and then that doesn't work all the time, but if you're really thinking about this is our strategy and this is where we want to go and these are the leaders that we want to bring on, then you have to, again, have the conversation with that employee and go through these steps. The self-awareness step. Well, what parts of self-awareness do they need to really understand? And then they have to put together a development plan. So how am I going to grow into this? And they have to practice it. I think coaching is a great place for this because it's a safe place to be able to have conversations about what's working, what's not working. And then it takes some time to do that. Then they grow. And I said, then it's on a complete repeat cycle. So look at who's this person? Where are you asking them to go? What are the gaps? And then determining what's the development strategy to fill those gaps.
Okay, and time frame, is there some sort of expected time frame that our listeners can have in their mind of how long it takes to go through this process of developing them until they're fully in that leadership role?
Mhm.
I know the answers, it depends, but
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, of course it is. And so I have PeopleThink has a program, and it's 3 modules over 3 months that we get them ready to be competent and confident. Is that the right amount of time? Not so sure. Again, depends. I have my leadership programs go 6 to 9 months, and those are with senior people, moving the needle, those kinds of things, because we spend time together. We go through assessments, they do the practice, they come back and they say, it worked, it didn't work. What do I do? So, depending on the level, the 3 modules, 3 months is good to get them prepared to go into a leadership role. Once you're in that leadership role and you're still looking like, oh, VP, I want to go to SVP. Well, that's a different level, and you might need to go and perform and do different things. So, level is going to make a difference. Urgency is going to make a difference. Like, where are we? Like, are you willing to do what you have to in order to upskill? And we need you here in a month. Can you do it? And, a smart person who wants to be a leader is going to say, I'm in, I'm going to do it.
now you
Goes back
mentioned
to
your program.
motivation. Goes
Yeah, you
back to
mentioned your program, which, like 3 months, a module each month, to get somebody motivated and direct and have direction and clarity. Is that something that you recommend the business owner go through as well at the same time? Like, is is it a two-part puzzle, or is it really just the leaders need to just get the training that they need to get, and then they're going to come to the owner and say, "Hey, I know I need XYZ clarification. Can you give me that?"
Yeah. So if the leaders had no training at all, the answer is yes. They need, it's very important that they understand what their employees are going to go through. Do they do it at the same time? That's a no. There needs to be some separation because we need, so say I do 4 people within an organization. The leader's not going to be with them because we want them to be able to be in a confidential space where they can really talk freely and really talk about what they're great at and what they may not be so great at. That's part of that whole conversation. What's my leadership why? What's my purpose statement? So I would keep that completely separate. If the leader is a skilled leader, no, I'll talk them through the program, tell them what's in the program, and then say, let me have the folks you're moving into leadership. However, through that entire time, the participant and whoever leader they have to be having conversations about what they're working on, how they're doing, so that they can make sure that we are not living in a bubble. We think we're so smart, and then we find out maybe not so much. So it's really all about that communication and really discussing what they are learning throughout the program.
All right, folks, I'm going to take a quick pause here to just remind you about our upcoming Law Firm Growth Summit. Normally, I don't promote in the middle of a conversation, but since this is happening very shortly, February 4th, 5th, and 6th, and actually, so day number 2 is going to be focused on building your all-star team, which is exactly what we're talking about. So, just going to give you a highlight of some of the speakers that we have, as well as the topics they're going to be speaking on, to kind of whet your appetite for what's coming up at the Law Firm Growth Summit, which you can register for free at lawfirmgrowthsummit.com. Of course, my team is going to link everything up in the show notes for this episode, which will be available in your podcast player. So we have Jacqueline Foster, who's been a past guest on the podcast, as well as a speaker at our previous Law Firm Growth Summits, speaking on how to build a firm that grows itself. Gina Kotner, The Art of Effective Delegation, How to Trust Others and Hold Them Accountable. Charlie Mann, $1 Million Leadership, How to Unlock 7-Figure Growth as the Captain of Your Law Firm. Paula Veloza, Exploring Nearshore Support for Law Firm Efficiency. Brian Glass, Marketing That Doesn't Break the Bank, Cost-Effective Strategies for Solo and Small Firms. I realize I ventured into the marketing, so we'll stop there. But really great lineup and topic conversations that are directly in line with the conversation we're having here. So if leadership, growing your team, really stepping into that expansion role and delegation role, and stopping to do everything yourself is something that you need to focus on coming up in 2025. You don't want to miss day 2 of the Law Firm Growth Summit. You want to make sure that you join us there, and it's absolutely free to register, lawfirmgrowthsummit.com. So, Karen, I've got a leadership selection. I've chosen them. I've put them through your training, and they are now leading. How do I measure their success? How do I give them feedback? How do I lead the leader?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a different ballgame then. So obviously there has to be some goals set against it, and the leader and both leaders have to sit down together and make sure that they're very clear about what the objectives are and how often they'll be measured. Now, the feedback loop is really, really important, Moshe, because again, if you've got a new leader who really believes they're doing the right thing and their leader is not providing them feedback, then that serves no one. So there has to be regular conversations, not just about the business, but about this whole piece of development and leadership. And because everybody's so busy, because nobody ever has time, oftentimes that's the thing that slips. And again, if we start talking about that IQ EQ thing, the EQ is really what's going to make a difference for any leader. So it has to be very clear goals. with timelines associated with them that can be measured. And then there has to be a continuous feedback loop. And the leader, the leader of the leader can even go out into the group and start doing a little bit of 360 work and doing, skip level conversations to say, how is he or she doing? What's working? What's not working? What can we do a little bit differently? What needs to be shifted so that there's a continual pulse on the growth. And then if there's still gaps, and there will be, because we all have gaps, is then you start to make a different plan and start saying, okay, in the next 6 months, we need you to do X, Y, and Z. So it's just, they have to stay with them so that the growth is what is needed, expected, and can be measured.
Now, be measured is something I want to latch onto, because where I sit in both in my coaching role for our elite clients, as well as the fractional CFO role for our fractional CFO clients, um, measuring success is really important, and people really struggle around how to measure, right? They think there's two units of measure, which is revenue and profit, and even profit is pretty pretty far into a lot of business owners. So revenue is not the be all and end all for everybody. There's a lot of roles in your business that you'll have a really hard time tying the role directly to revenue, and with some it's dangerous to tie it to revenue. So we help our clients with developing KPIs that are specific to each role in each department, so that that person can be measured by something that it really is something that they're in command of and have the ability to succeed at, but is also pushing forward with the overall objective of the business. Do you have any specific guidance around developing measurable KPIs for the leader in their specific department that they're in charge of?
Yes. So if you think, again, if we go back to the original time that we were speaking a little bit earlier about what are the competencies that you want this leader to be able to measure against. So say whatever it is, it's communication, internal, external, it's decision making, it's coaching, it's big picture thinking, it's strategy, those kinds of things. Then what you can be able to do is, put a number against those, and it's 1 to 5, and then you can self-rate, and they can also rate. Now, that's the competency base. But then when you go back to the relationship piece, Moshe, it's about retention. It's about empty seats. It's about your recruiting strategy. It's about how often your employees go to HR. I mean, those are real places that you can start to say, well, wait a minute, is this relationship, what we're trying to do is build the relationship, build the communication, build the influencing, build the listening skills. Are they working? And those are places that you can actually get numbers against. The other thing is, I talked earlier about a 360. You can do a 360, and then you're getting input from the leader, as well as their direct reports, and potentially their colleagues, and potentially people above them. So then that's another factor to be able to look and say, okay, we're doing a 360 now, we're going to do a 360 in 9 months. Let's see what the distinctions are, and let's see where you sit with that. And then you go back to, at the end of the day, what's the business model? What are you as a leader trying to achieve, and are they achieving it? And if yes, great. And if no, well, then that's a different conversation to have.
And you mentioned this 360 a few times. Maybe I missed it. If you already explained it, can you just explain what a 360 is?
Yes. So a 360 is a way to get feedback from your direct reports, your colleagues, and your people that you report to. And so what it is it gives you information on how well you are doing in particular areas. And there's many different types of 360s out there. And the way that I operate with 360s is I get a foundational piece, and then do the coaching work. And in 6 or 9 months, we will redo it and see if the numbers and how they have shifted, and where the success has been, and as if there's still gaps in particular areas. And the best 360s are the ones that ask for quantitative and qualitative data. So you're going out to your community and you're saying, hey, I need feedback. I would like you to be honest, not mean, however, uh, that happens at times as well. And then you really start to understand again the quantitative and the qualitative. And they're both really, really important to understand how you're showing up. And you might be living in your own bubble and think, oh my goodness, I'm doing such a great job. And maybe not.
Very good. Thank you for explaining that. And this is the last question, and then we'll close it out. Give you an opportunity to share with our audience before we leave. But not always does a leader work out, right? We elevate somebody to the leadership role, and it's just a dud. And we've done everything we can to get them where they need to be, but it's time to throw in the towel. Any advice on how to dethrone somebody without firing them? I mean, they were great beforehand. We put them in the leadership role because we thought very highly of them. So how do we transition somebody from a leadership role out of that role without losing them, and maybe even elevating them in the process? What are your recommendations there? And yeah, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah. So that goes back to that 8Q place that we talked about. I mean, it's really about empathy and it's really about having a very clear conversation. Now, what I will tell you, if there's a strong feedback throughout the process, that leader is going to know that there are some complications. And as the conversations are happening with the feedback, it's important for the leader to talk to the newer leader and say, okay, we've got some options moving forward. Here are the options. You stay within the organization and we move you into another position. You leave the organization and we don't want you to leave the organization. You stay in this position. We'll give you 6 more months. We'll provide you X, Y, and Z, and we'll see if you can do well. If that doesn't work, then we go back to the first two. And so it's a build with that new leader or that person, because otherwise it's just mean spirited and it's not fair to them. It's embarrassing. Everybody wants to do a good well, most people really want to do a good job. They want to be respected by their colleagues, Moshe. So if they get transitioned to another position, there has to be some communication around it. Not, oh, they didn't do a good job, but we feel like he or she is much better suited here and they're going to blah blah blah, so that they have self-respect and still respect of the organization.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I'm wondering if even giving them an opportunity to be able to give you a reason why they're stepping down from the position. So it's less about we're removing them and more about this is a choice that they've made, and we're here to support their career in any
Mhm,
way that it needs to take.
mhm,
Um, very, very interesting things to think about. But we kind of need to step into when we're putting a leader in place. We have to have that possibility there. The same way that
always.
when you hire somebody, right? There's a possibility that they're not going to be a good hire, no matter what kind of due diligence we do on the front end. And then you have to have an exit strategy to remove them from the business, which is something that's people really really struggle with and have a hard time doing. So. All right. This is the tail end of our recording. We're going to just bring it back to you. Before I do that, I'm going to one more plug for the Law Firm Growth Summit we'll do in just a moment. And then I'm going to turn the microphone back to you. And we're going to ask you for two things in which you can think about while I promo the summit. One is, what is one parting piece of advice or wisdom that you want to leave with our audience? And number two, how can they get a hold of you? What's the next step? If you have something you want to share with them or a place you want to send them, where might that be? Folks, the Law Firm Growth Summit is a virtual conference that we put on once a year. It is the most respected conference around growing your law firm in the industry, in person or virtual. Uh, we created it virtual for a very specific reason. It was before COVID, FYI. We didn't do it just because we had to. It was so to give everybody the opportunity to attend, whether you're able to afford travel, whether you're able to afford time out of the office for that travel. All of that stuff is off the table. It's free to register, right? There's no barrier to entry financially. Like, you literally just need to go to lawfirmgrowthsummit.com, and register there. Now, we don't just cater to people who need a free ticket, who need to not travel, right? Like if you're in the multiple millions of revenue, we have topics for you as well. We cater to a very large audience, and we bring in industry experts and leaders, and we have topics on all three categories. So we break it into startup, expansion, and legacy creator. And the startup is for that fledgling law firm. Those are those basic conversations that you need to have and guidance that you need to have to be able to grow that first phase of growth in your business. Then we've got the expansion phase, which is where we help you to expand beyond the success that you've already had and to start to grow beyond yourself, expand your team, and expand how you bring in business, get away from just referrals only and start to put your eggs in multiple baskets. And then we've got legacy creator. You've already won, you're doing great things, but you have a legacy that you're trying to achieve, and we have topics for you as well. So this is a conference that is very well put together. It is very well run, and I'm not just patting myself on the back. It's just the fifth time we're doing it, right? We're really good at what we do, and folks who have attended will attest to the fact that this is an amazing event, and we're hoping to have well over 2,000 registrants for it. So grab your seat while you can. Lawfirmgrowthsummit.com. We'd love to see you there, even if it's just for 1 or 2 sessions. You can get your free registration now at lawfirmgrowthsummit.com. Karen, back to you.
Yeah. Okay. So my parting words of wisdom, Moshe, are every single person is a leader, and every single person has control over their career. And so self-aware, develop, grow, repeat. Because if you don't do it, nobody else is going to do it for you. So that's my parting, those are my parting words. In terms of how to get in touch with me, peoplethink.biz, B-I-Z, Kate Colligan at peoplethink.biz. And on my website, the program I mentioned was Keep It Real Leadership, 3 months over 3 modules. And I also have a podcast that's called Let's Talk Leadership, where I interview leaders of every make and model, law firms, CEOs, CHROs, and ask them the same 6 questions about leadership. And it's astonishing what they say. So those are my 2 places I'd love for you to go check out on peoplethink.biz.
Awesome, Karen. Love it. And folks, we're going to link up everything that Karen just shared, as well as any other things we discussed during this episode in the show notes, which can be found at profitwithlaw.com or in your podcast player in the description of the episode right beneath right beneath the title. And I just want to reiterate one last thing that Karen just said. She just spoke about the fact that everybody is a leader. Everybody is in charge of their own success. Everybody, owns their own destiny. And that is something that's really, really important for us to wrap our heads around, to understand, because when it comes to people, we sometimes try to fix them. We try to make them something that they're not ready to be or not ready to make themselves into. And we have to get better at understanding that we can't fix them, and they're going to have to do it themselves. And if they can't do it on the timeline that we need to move on and put the right people in the right seats for those positions, which means we got to get better at letting people go faster if they're not working out. We got to get better at moving people out of leadership roles if they're not leading in the way that we need them to, because that is the thing that is going to hamper our success. What is the key to growth in our business is expanding our team to create more capacity so we can serve more clients, and then serving more clients. If we fail at expanding our team by putting the wrong people in the wrong seats and not removing them in a quick time frame, then what's going to end up happening is that we're signing ourselves up for a really painful process of the growth journey, which is slow growth. And slow growth comes with a lot of expensive growth at the same time, right? Because we're paying for things that are inefficient, ineffective, and what ends up happening is that it shows up in the bottom line with the lack of profit. So many businesses come to me, they're doing multiple millions in revenue, and their profit margin is 10% or less, some between 10 and 15%. Your margin should be somewhere between 35 and 50%. And if you're running below that, it's indicative of a challenge, a problem, or you're in the middle of a growth phase and you haven't filled that capacity yet. That's a possibility. But we should be in that for a very brief period, meaning we add capacity, we should be able to fill it fairly quickly within, 3 to 6 months. So there should be a very brief period where we're running at lower profitability. Otherwise, we should be at that peak profitability that I'm mentioning. And that should be a really early indicator. So if you look at your business and say, hey, you know what? I'm actually not running at a 35% profit margin. I'm running at less, or worse, I'm losing money. Then you definitely want to have a strategy call with us to figure out if there's something that we can do to help you. You can get there at profitwithlaw.com/strategy session, profitwithlaw.com/strategy session. Book a free call with us. We'll talk to you. We'll help you figure out and analyze your business and see if there's something that we can do to help you move the needle there. And that's it, folks. We'll see you next week on another amazing interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. Karen, thank you so much for being here, sharing your expertise. We really had a great conversation. I loved it. Our listeners are going to really enjoy listening to it, and we'll see everybody next week. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you so much.